it's my absolute pleasure to invite two keynote speakers to the stage to finish off this afternoon's first plenary. And first of all, that is Yacouba Sawadogo. So the GLF is known for its youth group, known for its youth movement. And to balance that, we have a senior movement as well, a senior group. And Yacouba is the head of that group for us. He is from northern Burkina Faso. He was born 72 years ago and struggled as a young man to understand what was happening in that degrading environment and realized that there needed to be action. And it is our absolute pleasure to have Yacouba with us because he is the man who stopped the desert. He is the famous person who's shown us how to do it in the most challenging of environments. So we have with him Carly, who is translating for him into Maori, his native tongue, so that he is aware of what is going on. And his younger brother, Bakary, who's going to read his keynote speech to us so that we can understand it in his language and his words. But before we start that, I would like to invite our second speaker to the stage, an environmental hero, somebody who is probably known to all of us, and that is Tony Ronaldo. Please, Tony, come and join us on the stage. Because as another member of the senior group, the senior movement in the Global Landscape Forum, he realized, Felix, that planting trees is a lot of work. And if you can use those things that are already there in the ground and nurture those, it's going to help provide a shortcut in that environment. Yacouba, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us here today. You can hear from the applause now just how delighted we are for you to grace us on this occasion. And we would like to hear your words spoken by your brother to give us an insight in how we can use your thinking, your action in other parts of the world. Great. So, Bakary, would you like to share Yacouba's words with us? Please proceed. And we've got something extra on the program today as well. And that is, because of the warmth of your applause, Yacouba would also like to, for everyone in the audience who understands Maori, to speak to you, okay? And we will have a translation of that from his brother as well. So, please, Yacouba.
Kasi barka na yal suuta bale the pusia fas barka bale tenganga goma dunia ka tenganga le premier na tonwe nafa adam bi fa la nafa tenganga la nafa zamana fa jilli de puria barka runde abra yamba me yamba mbod mam nambang mam tumda mpuria barka ya paba rapa wenna wawya to ne hentar koyge wutta bale la sukre yala la tamti shewa man bi sukus Sugu soma. And the poor barka chengo. Am yure la Sawadogo Yacouba yituguruga. Am yulotu.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, may God bless this great ceremony. I would like to express my delight at being here this afternoon. There is no greater joy than to see my work being duly acknowledged. I, Sawadogo Yacouba, coming from Guruga, Burkina Faso, while running a trade business at home, have been cultivating the land since my childhood when I would help my father work in the fields. By observing and reflecting, a thought struck me. I decided I would give up on my business in order to find out how best to harvest and to generate soils so that they will be fertile again. This was in 1974, following the worst drought ever. Flocks had been wiped out. I knew it will be very challenging, but neither pains nor failure would ward me off. I had nothing to lose. My grandparents and parents had been living off the soil, and their example would give me strength. I knew the land could feed us properly, and that it would instruct me how best to handle it. The first step I was to adopt the Zai technique. I would dig holes in hardness soil, filling them with organic manure and sowing them with seeds. Whenever it would rain, plants would grow fast and beautifully. They would contrast sharply with the other village fields. The difference was spectacular. Although rainfall would be sporadic and lacking as usual, there was similar contrast in my own field, and only the plants in holes would thrive and eventually make it through the drought. The second step was then to build stone strings on the ground to prevent rainwater from flowing away immediately. The third step was to plant trees within the fields to protect seed beds and to stem wind and erosion. Despite the severe drought that was harming more and more people, I would feed my family easily right since the first harvest, relying exclusively on the field work. It was really tough at the beginning. No one would understand me, and as I abandoned trade for bassland, worse, some would try to discourage me as I persisted. I could feel how my own family and friends were saddened and how were disapproved of my choice. They all were convinced I was being foolish. Some would even think I had lost my mind. Sections of the forest were burned down on 3 occasions. I would never retaliate. To quarrel does not resolve anything, and it is unnecessary, exhausting. But God witnessed those monstrous deeds, which was enough. I did not need to wage war with those perpetrators. I gave up everything, time and belongings, to dedicate myself to the land. I haven't had the opportunity to build a proper house, and despite my being 75 years old, I own a donkey and a cart only. My one wealth is the forest I planted. Many visitors are attracted to it every day, visiting and asking me questions to learn the techniques and replicate them elsewhere. Coming to such a result demanded hard labor. Laziness does not fit in here. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, as the saying goes, unconscious are those who do not realize that land is mankind's most valuable wealth. Drought is rampant, soils are depleting, and the trees meant to protect nature are vanishing. In short, nature is being wrecked. Action must be taken to counter these different issues. Humans are the first ones responsible for the deterioration of the environment, the ones wronging nature as we are all witnessing it. Everyone has to work for a better environment. The Right Livelihood Awards struggle to safeguard the environment had been illustrated many times over. By awarding just a case, the Right Livelihood Award shows it is concerned by the deterioration of the environment and is troubled by its effect on mankind. Through this award, the Foundation fights against drought and participates in the safeguarding of nature. Such an award can only have positive consequences on the state of the forest and on manner in which one can fight to preserve nature. This award is very timely as I was dreaming of enhancing forest protection and densification, water retention, and wells. I foster ambitions to educate and train people against deterioration of the environment. Hence, this award being valuable and meaningful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bakary. Fantastic expose there of the work and description. And you heard it here first. Burkina Faso, Karen, is 50 years ahead of the World Bank because they put natural capital as part of their household assets 50 years before the World Bank. So credit to Yacouba for leading that movement. And now to our second landscape hero, Tony Rinaudo. Would you like to come and share some thoughts with us as images flick on the screen behind?
Thank you, Tony. Although I like to see myself as a junior senior. I read that about $1 trillion have been spent on aid in Africa. At least in the remote parts that I often visit, there's not much evidence for where it all went. For 20 years, I and a growing number of others have been providing evidence that demands a verdict. When the poorest country in the world, with an extreme climate on the edge of the Sahara Desert, with no government assistance at that time and minimal non-government organisation assistance, can affect an environmental, economic and social revolution which changed its recent history, this is something that demands a response. It was a revolution which restored 200 million trees across 5 million hectares of previously barren land, and as a result of which an additional 500,000 tonnes of grain are grown every year, enough to feed 2.5 million people. Without irrigation, without fertilisers, improved seed or subsidies. And as a result of which, gross income going directly to farmers has increased by up to $1,000 per household, or nationwide $900 million. And over that period, all this has come about at a cost of less than $2 per hectare from foreign aid. And this is because the credit for the spontaneous spread and uptake goes to millions of poor smallholder farmers who could tell a good deal when they saw one. This is evidence which demands a verdict, and especially so in a world desperately in need of solutions. A world on the edge of a precipice, one which, if we fall into it, will take life on Earth into a territory not experienced before in human existence. What we do or do not do in the next 10 years will determine the outcome. In 10 years, there will be 8.5 billion people to feed on a natural resource base, the soil, which is already 40% degraded. Globally, a minimum of 2 billion hectares need restoration. Make no mistake, I didn't class them degraded lands. In my dictionary, these are potential lands, opportunity lands. We will have to feed ourselves with the added significant handicap of climate change and all that means for agriculture. In his old age, a survivor of the American Dust Bowl experience said, "We kept thinking that tomorrow things would change. Sure, you kept doing what you were doing. We thought that maybe there were things that you could do that would make things a bit better than the way they were. You didn't try something different, but you just tried it harder, the same thing that didn't work." When I was fighting desert encroachment, I and many others kept doing the same thing, but doing it harder. Today we face a crisis far greater than the American Dust Bowl experience or the expansion of the Sahara Desert. Life on Earth as we know it is at stake, and for too many, life itself is at stake. We don't have time to just keep doing the same thing, but harder. Business as usual won't save us. We need disruptive approaches and technologies. The disruptive technique which transformed Niger was and is embarrassingly simple. It mimics the same principles that a vine dresser uses on a grapevine to get the best results. Each spring, excess branches are culled, leaving the best ones, which are then trained and managed. And the emphasis is on management. From drylands to the tropics, from lowlands to the highlands, just beneath the soil surface of vast areas of the world's degraded lands lays a repository of living stumps, roots and seeds, a treasure chest of suppressed life, suppressed potential, ready and waiting to be released. The regreening approach, farmer-managed natural regeneration, takes the principles of selection, pruning, and management and applies them to the stems emerging from this existing repository. And hence, it's a very low-cost, rapid, and scalable approach, an approach which can and is being adopted spontaneously by millions of the world's poorest smallholder farmers and communities. In that we attempt to work with whole communities and populations, this approach is also a forest and landscape management approach, because it requires changes in such mismanagement practices as total annual burning, complete removal of all above-ground woody biomass, and continuous free-range grazing. In that success depends on human behaviour change, its application involves, first of all, the regreening of the mindscapes and turning of enemies into friends. We walk alongside, with respect and politely, we walk alongside individuals and communities, demonstrating that when we work with nature instead of fighting against it, nature will work for us. It involves demonstrating that a better future can be built for ourselves and our children when we restore vegetation cover on the land we manage. I almost withdrew what I was about to say in fear that it would be misconstrued, but please accept it in the spirit it's intended, not as an arrogant criticism of what we're currently doing, but as a challenge to take a closer look at these low-cost, people-driven, nature-friendly approaches. I'm not offended if you doubt the figures that I've shared. I won't be angry if you question the figures. But at my age, it's getting harder to be patient with those who will not invest the time required to read the growing body of evidence and see for themselves that even if half of what I shared is true, I won't be able to accept that easily if they don't do that. And it's even harder to be patient with those who know it's true but continue with business as usual. Coming back to the need to approach things differently, Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And I would add to that, we cannot solve them working alone. I was in Zurich earlier this week, and before I stood up to speak, they told me, this podium, after World War II, it's where Churchill delivered his speech, challenging Europe to unite and work together to rebuild the continent. And I don't know if they were trying to boost my ego because I shared the same podium or to intimidate me by telling me that. But that time has come again. We have to unite and work together to restore devastated lands, not just in Europe, but globally. At this point, it's appropriate that I honour Dr. Dennis Garrity. Former Director General of ICRAF, United Nations Dryland Ambassador, founder and chair of the Global Evergreening Alliance, for his enormous vision and tireless efforts to make the world a better place. The Global Evergreening Alliance is an international NGO whose members include development and conservation organisations, research institutes and advocacy organisations. It coordinates the development and implementation of massive-scale environmental restoration, sustainable agroforestry and forest projects in developing countries around the world. I see it as a vehicle through which we can do disruptive, business unusual activities to tackle some of the world's most pressing problems. 6 years ago, Tony Simons told me that if you spell Tony backwards, it reads, "Why not?" I like that. Why not is a very good question. Why not mount a global regreening revolution, the likes of which have never been seen before in the world? One which addresses multiple issues simultaneously, one which does it with no regrets. There's no side effects with this type of approach. We have the precedent. We have the lessons learned. There's a growing body of research findings. We have the resources. And if we love life, if we love our children, we have both a solemn responsibility and a life and death motivation to give nothing less than our best. Will you join us? Why not? Thank you.
So, Honourable Deputy Mayor, we may not have the podium where Churchill spoke, but this is the podium where Tony Rinaudo and Yacouba Sawadogo spoke. So you have the treasure amongst you. We are running behind, but I've been asked to say a few closing words about the fantastic 3 opening speeches that we had, the fantastic and amazing insights we got from our 4 panelists, and now 2 brilliant keynote speeches from our 2 landscape heroes, Tony Rinaudo and Yacouba Sawadogo. I'm glad that you enjoyed Tony's joke about why not, because it definitely characterizes his approach to life. My wife doesn't enjoy that joke as much because her name is Sarah. And when you spell that backwards, exactly. Okay, we have some serious issues to deal with this week, and the GLF is here about commitment to action. We've got to get behind that. We've had Al Gore, in the face of inconvenient truths, banging that beat, yeah? That rhythm of Al Gore. Come on, wake up, wake up, wake up. That rhythm of Al Gore. And Felix told us this afternoon, it's not about that rhythm of Al Gore. It's about changing the algorithm. It's about getting out there and using modern science, young approaches to address these enormous pressing issues we have around climate change. And so, it's not just about the science this weekend, though. It's also about the art. And in the past, everyone used to paint pictures in portrait form, yeah? Because it was all about you. And you commissioned somebody to paint yourself, or you did a self-portrait of yourself, and it was a portrait. It was in portrait format. And then 500 years ago, the Dutch landscape painters came around, and those Dutch landscape painters couldn't fit it in portrait format, so they had to put it into landscape format. They had to include people and the natural vegetation behind it. And that is what the landscape approach is all about, connecting people with those biophysical landscapes and putting on top of that the political landscape and also the financial landscape. And it's great to see in this coming week that dimension of connecting not only the natural capital worth, but how do we get a revenue and investment back from that? And so it's about connecting those four dimensions, that human landscape, the social landscape, the biophysical landscape, the political landscape, and the financial landscape. And you'll hear more, perhaps later, about merging that with the institutional landscape as well. And so, for those of you who don't remember the 10 principles of the landscape approach, that is the portrait approach, and that is the landscape approach. Thank you for listening, and please give our two speakers a very warm applause.